In honor of Halloween, I figured I'd make a spooky, scary theory. And what better way to do that than with a theory about mind control and a brain-eating parasite. Today's theory starts with one of the spookiest Pokemon ever introduced. You know him, you love him, it's everybody's favorite horrifying victim of brain-eating parasitism, Paras and Parasect. It's pretty much common knowledge at this point that Parasect is actually a vacant insect's body being controlled by the hefty red mushroom on its back. But what if I told you Paras wasn't the only Pokemon being controlled by a parasite? What if I told you it wasn't even the only Gen 1 Pokemon being controlled by a parasite? In fact, there is another. Trainers and breeders, gather round my campfire as I tell you about what could be the vilest example of parasitic Pokemon to date. A creature which impairs its victim's brain functions, overburdens its physical body, and even denies it its proper evolutionary path. I present to you none other than Vileplume. Now, don't let its bubbly, flowery demeanor fool you. In fact, it's the flower that you should be most wary of, as it's the source of the horror I'm about to reveal to you. You see, Vileplume's flower is based on the largest single flower in the world, Rafflesia arnoldii, or more commonly known as the corpse lily due to the fact that it smells like, it smells like a corpse. And indeed, Vileplume is known to be able to emit a horrible stench from its flower, in the same way the corpse lily from which it was inspired tends to. But its smelly smell that smells smelly is the least of your concerns. You see, Vileplume shares another lesser-known trait with its parent plant. The corpse lily, which tends to avoid the sun and grows in the moist shadows of the jungle, is a parasite. Using insidious root-like tendrils, the corpse lily bores its way into its host and leeches off valuable nutrients. Indeed, it's more than possible that the Vileplume flower mimics the corpse lily's parasitic techniques, using its parasitic fibers to slowly bore its way into the nutrient-rich innards of its oddish host. Now, I know this may seem a little ridiculous. I mean, you'd think this would have been mentioned at some point if it was true, and while the Pokédex doesn't outright confirm this theory, it does provide some interesting insight. Take for example Vileplume's Pokédex entries from Red and Blue. They mention that Vileplume's flower has a tendency to grow to be so massive it actually causes the Pokémon difficulty moving. The flower grows, and as it does, its head becomes heavy and hard to hold up. This difficulty in mobility might seem like a meaningless little fun fact, however, it's actually very consistent with what literally thousands of parasites do to their hosts in real life. In the wild, we've seen dozens upon dozens of parasitic life forms that revolve around infecting a host, stealing nutrients to multiply, and then infecting a new host who can spread the next generation of parasites on. Vileplume's big flower would seem to be deliberately growing itself to the point where its host is at a natural disadvantage to its competitors. This might also explain why, even though Vileplume is a third stage evolution, its stats are still relatively low, even in comparison to other third stage Gen 1 Pokemon. Not convinced yet? Maybe it's just not spooking you. Fair enough. In that case, let's back this theory up by taking a look at Vileplume's evolutionary tree. Starting out as a young sproutling Oddish, this Pokemon is born healthy and parasite-free, as is evidenced by its crown of verdant chloroplast-filled leaves, and notable lack of any form of flower. However, when it evolves, we see quite a strange transition. A once petite body is replaced with what I can only describe as dummy thickness, and a cute smile is contorted into a dopey, out-of-it look. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where the parasite has awoken from dormancy and begun to strike. The budding flower bulb on Gloom's head is the parasitic flower's humble beginnings. As it infects the Oddish, it forces Oddish's body to start growing, and growing, and growing. However, this growth comes at a cost, because nothing comes for free. The flower is forced to reroute vital nutrients from Gloom's brain, making it dopey, dumb, and clumsy. However, this forced transformation lends its own benefits. Gloom's stats rise as its body and strength improve at the parasite's request. However, as the flower replaces Oddish's green foliage, the lack of chloroplasts means that Gloom cannot grow any more than it already has. No photosynthesis means little growth. Enter the Leafstone, which is the only method to evolve Gloom into Vileplume. These mysterious stones cause certain grass Pokemon to evolve, however, no one is really sure how. The game merely describes them as peculiar stones that spur certain Pokemon to evolve, but it's my own belief that these stones stimulate a hyper-accelerated level of photosynthesis, enriching a Pokemon with plenty of natural energy, pushing them to evolve. This is how a Gloom becomes a Vileplume. Trainers are inadvertently feeding the parasite energy-rich leaf stones, enriching the parasite and giving it the growth boost it needed to take control of what was once an Oddish. Vileplume's smile returns as the plant has taken over its host's nervous system, and its lifelong mission is complete, ready for the cycle to continue. It's a sad, vicious circle, but hey, even parasites need love. Now, most of you watching this are probably wondering why I left out the fourth member of Oddish's evolutionary line. And I'm here to tell you that no, I did not forget about Bellossom. I was just leaving the best piece of evidence for last. See, it's my belief that Bellossom is in fact Oddish's truest evolutionary form. To prove this, let's look at Bellossom's pre-evolution Gloom. Gloom's newly infected body can't, with its limited resources and lack of chloroplasts, reach its full development. However, if you give it a leaf stone, its little problem is solved. Fresh grass-type energy fills it to the brim, and it can bloom its flower and assume control of its host. However, if instead you give your Gloom a sunstone, it evolves, only this time into Bellossom. Thus begs the question, why? Well, let's take a look back at Vileplume's inspiration. The corpse lily is a quite temperamental plant. This is a fancy way of saying it's a delicate flower that can only thrive when specific environmental conditions are met. Remember, these plants do not photosynthesize, which means the sun is not their friend. Too much direct exposure will only directly harm these plants by drying them out and exposing them to pests. Enter the Sunstone, another peculiar stone described as burning red as the sun. Instead of stimulating a natural photosynthesis effect on Pokemon, like the leaf stones would tend to, sunstones provide what I can only describe as raw sunlight energy to the Pokemon that holds it. This would coincidentally explain why the Pokemon who evolve using these stones are all based on plants that require an extraordinary amount of sunlight. But thus begs the question, why do sunstones turn infected Glooms into Bellossom? Well, these sunstones are actively killing the parasite via exposure to red-hot sun radiation. With no chloroplasts to absorb the energy, the flower would effectively wilt and the parasite would perish. This could be actually evidenced by Bellossom's own Pokédex entries, whereas you might recall Vileplume has a hard time moving because of its large flower. Bellossom is light on its feet, dancing around in a ritual to bring out the sun, in order to nourish its body and perhaps to prevent a parasitic relapse. Add to this the fact that Bellossom's hula skirt is very reminiscent to Oddish's own grassy crown, and it becomes more and more likely that Oddish was meant to become a Bellossom, until the Vileplume flower got in the way. But wait, you might be saying, what about Vileplume's ability Chlorophyll? If it has this ability, that should prove that this theory is wrong, right? Well, not necessarily. See, this ability's explanation essentially says a Pokemon's movement speed is increased when it's exposed to harsh sunlight. However, this doesn't mean the stimulation is necessarily good. Take humans, for example. When we get into dangerous situations, we tend to produce adrenaline, which makes us stronger, more focused, and you guessed it, faster. Vileplume is being enriched by an adrenaline-like chemical, increasing Vileplume's speed so that it can get out of the sunlight faster. That's why, despite this ability seeming to indicate Vileplume's affinity for sunlight, it's never actually mentioned in a Pokédex entry that Vileplume uses sunlight for anything at all. All of this can only mean one thing, and it's pretty nefarious. Vileplume is not what it seems, and every time you evolve your Gloom into a Vileplume, you're essentially killing it. Happy Halloween, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'll leave you with this question of the day. Do you think there would ever be a Galarian or regional form of Parasect that doesn't have a mushroom stuck to its back? Essentially giving the Paras line its own Blossom. Anyways, happy late Halloween everyone, and always remember to keep on loving good spooks.